Hey, okay.
Hey, yeah, we are.
Jeez.
We've
That
got
was a ride.
quite a while of funny comments.
Next office hours, rebuilding Riverside in effect. Indeed. I think we
Indeed.
might have to.
Yeah. And as always, 99% of people are blocked by office hours not starting on time. I blame
99%.
Riverside.
99% of people.
I blame
It's actually
Riverside for
crazy.
that.
Well, hello, effect enjoyers. Welcome back to Office Hours. Office Hours number 37, which is pretty crazy.
Hello, everyone.
Let me... All my windows got closed when I had to restart this, so just give me 1 second to get myself set up. But maybe in the meantime, you folks who are interested in us looking at something or talking about something or whatever can pop something into the thread that I created on Discord.
Yes.
Also, exciting news. For those who don't know, let me share my screen. How do I do this?
Yep.
God, every time I open Riverside, the user interface is different.
It's a new experience every time.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, we have merged effect-smol back into the effect repo. So effect-smol, it was archived. Sebastian maybe unarchived it.
Yeah, I think it did due to the PR stuff.
But we closed all the PRs. Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
Effect-smol was archived yesterday. Now it's not. So somebody unarchived it. But we merged the v4 code base back into the effect repository. So now the main branch of effect reflects the v4 code base. All the history from v3 is still here. We used a simple like synthetic merge commit strategy to make sure that all of the history and everything like that is preserved, so attribution and things like that don't go away. Like the main branch still reflects the full history of the effect repo, but v3 development will continue on a separate v3 branch. So if you're looking for the v3 code, it's on the v3 branch, and we still have some like cleanup and things to do, but the major pieces are back in place. Still need to like wire up like minor release publication from the v3 branch, but we should be able to continue publishing betas from the effect repo now. So yeah, all of this to say, this merger back into the main repository and everything like that is because we're prepping for release candidates to start rolling out for v4. So very exciting. Still like not a concrete timeline on that, but it's going to be very soon now, because one of the things that we wanted to have done before we started rolling out release candidates was getting the code back into the main effect repo. So yeah, in the small repository, I mean, if you had a smol, yesterday I migrated all the issues over, and then everybody who had an open PR should have gotten a comment. So let me actually go back to like, I don't know, this one. Anybody who had an open pull request should have gotten like an automated comment from me, basically saying like, if you want this PR to continue to exist, move it over to the effect repo, because there's no like simple way to automate transferring PRs over. So yeah. So anyway, all of that to say, the main branch now reflects the v4 code base. v3 exists on the v3 branch, and we're prepping for release candidates to start rolling out. So v4 preview docs ready? No.
No.
Nice try though.
Yeah. But still, exciting times coming. Exciting times are coming, indeed. Oop. Did my connection broke? Are we still live, or it was just my connection? Let me check. Oh, okay. So yeah, I think we lost Maxwell. I thought it was my connection. I was not sure, but instead it was Maxwell's. So let me just double check. Yeah, we are still live. Yeah. So what I'll continue what Maxwell was saying until we wait for him to come back. He had Maxwell just confirmed that his internet went offline as always. Exciting times. Another way, Maxwell was saying that. Let me share maybe my screen so we can show that. Let me just show this one. This one. Let me reorganize my windows. I wasn't prepared. There we are. Oh, he's back in meanwhile. Is Maxwell back meanwhile?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
My camera may or may not work.
Yeah.
My internet went out, so I'm operating off my phone's hotspot right now.
Okay.
So I might need you to do like the screen sharing and things like that today.
Yeah, sure. I was about to do that. Let me just share screen.
Anyway, yeah.
We were saying that over the old.
I don't even remember where I left off before I got disconnected.
So I think that we were saying that we are now in a situation where the effect-smol should eventually be archived as well. Right now, seems that it is in a situation where only us collaborators can actually interact with that and create new pull requests and issues. But where you left off, I think you were mentioning that unfortunately, due to GitHub not having a proper way to basically migrate into a repository the existing PRs. Everyone who had in the past a PR opened over effect-smol should have received a comment like this one, basically saying that unfortunately we cannot automatically migrate the PR over the new repo. But if you want to, you can do that. You can just rebase your PR over the new repo and comment in here maybe with the replacement PR, or even better, in the new one, reference the older one if there was some discussion going on. So at least there is some way to keep context as an LLM.
When you do open up PRs or issues, I'm gonna try to figure out a way to automate this, but when you do open up PRs or issues in the effect repository now, if you folks can tag it with v3 or v4 depending on what the issue is related to, that'd be great. I haven't set up like automations to do this yet. So I'll work on that, but yeah, that would help us to sort through issues. Also, if you're opening up a pull request that targets v3, make sure you're targeting the v3 branch when you do it. Because I don't, again, like, I'm going to try to figure out if there's a way to set up automations to do this, but it'll just help us out if you folks can remember to do that.
So let me finish reorganize windows. Okay. So that said, okay. So I think that covers basically what's happening in the repositories. So if you have received a lot of notifications about your previously opened issues or PRs, you know why. We are in this phase on reorganizing and moving stuff around in order to get v4 up and running for next releases. So meanwhile, did we get some questions either here or on Discord? Let me maybe double check.
I think we did.
Nice.
There was a question in Discord. I'm new to Effect. I need to construct a subscription ref in an event listener and access it from a main effect. Since there is no subscription ref.make unsafe to use in the event listener, I tried effect.runsync subscription-ref.make, which seems to work. I was worried that runsync might run some kind of a finalizer as it returns. Well, answering questions like this without code and office hours is kind of difficult. I will say that I'm not sure why, like, what is the use case for constructing a subscription ref in an event listener? Usually you would have the subscription ref constructed outside and then publish changes to the ref, like from the event listener, or you, like, if it's a multi-shot event listener, you can also use like streams and things like that. But yeah, I guess the real question, Ion, that the first question that comes to mind is like, why do you need, is there a minimal repro you can give us to look at to like work with? And secondly, like, why does the subscription ref need to be constructed inside the event listener? Why can't it be constructed outside?
Okay.
Lloyd asked in Twitch chat, is the idea that anything with a 4.0 enhancement tag will be part of RC before the release? Can we have a tag for post v4 release? I'm not trying to get crazy with tags in GitHub. The publication workflows for v3 and v4 will be the same as they were before. Everything will be based on change sets. Publication will be based on semver tags. There'll be like a release associated with the publication, etc., etc. The only reason why we have these tags here is so that we as the maintainers know if an issue or a pull request is related to v3 or v4. That's like it. But the workflow for publication, like for releases and things like that, is not changing. The tag, like the version tag, not GitHub tag, but like the version, the semver tag that we publish release candidates under, instead of reading beta dot blah blah blah, we'll probably just read rc dot blah blah blah, right? So we'll change we'll change the beta tag over to an RC tag, but like nothing else will change. Nickelborn, related to the subscription ref question, said maybe using stream.from event listener and then map effect later. Yeah, you could do that. I see there are concrete use cases for like publishing to a subscription ref from an event listener. Like if you only want to see changes that happened, because the changes stream from the subscription ref will handle that for you. but without having code to look at, it's really hard to understand the use case. So like usually we need some code to go on. Otherwise, like we're just kind of spitballing.
Yeah. Also, the thing that sounds weird is constructing inside of the event listener rather than outside. That's probably the thing that's mostly like why.
There was a question from Max saying, I've been affecting in an existing code base. Our main backend is an Express server. I've been needing to build RPC over WebSockets on top of that Express server. Naturally, Effects RPC was my first choice. I managed to get it working, but I'm not sure my solution is really the best. I have an example repo here with the recreation of my solution, as I can't share the actual code. It's only missing me also putting the rec.session into a fiberref so the RPC handler functions can make use of the user's session. Is there a better way to handle this integration? Mattia, maybe you can pop open that code and we can look at it.
Okay, let me bump in. Okay. Is that big enough?
Maybe like one more tick.
Yeah, let me also zoom in. Okay. I need to rearrange all of my stuff. Yeah. Okay. So this is supposed to be our RPC WebSocket server, right? Did we say? Yeah. RPC server. We have a socket server live that has a finalizer that closes the WebSocket server.
Before we even get into this,
yeah,
there are layers
yeah
exported from Effect that construct the socket server for you based on like how you need to construct the WebSockets. So like if you're in a node environment, there's layers that target node. I think using the I think it's using the WS package in Effect. I'm not sure. I can't remember.
I think so.
And then there's also layers that construct a WebSocket server using the global WebSocket constructor if you're in an environment that supports that. So the first thing I notice here is like, I would see if you could leverage those layers which handle everything related to the server for you. It's like the first thing I would say.
Let me double check real quick, but I think I recall as well.
While you're taking a peek, I'll answer some questions from chat.
Yep.
How about pull requests that have been opened by the community, but you already know or expect that they will not be merged until after 4.0 is released? How do you keep track of those? I don't think there's anything we're intentionally excluding from merge. I think there's PRs that naturally are deprioritized in favor of work that we know needs to be done. So nothing is changing. Like literally nothing is changing about the PR workflow with this new like V4 upcoming RC. Everything is the same. If your PR is targeting a stable API and you're worried that the changes won't make it in before like V4 is stably released, I wouldn't worry too much about it. We're gonna have a period of time where we go through all of the V4 PRs and make sure that anything that's related to a stable API is addressed before we perform like the final RC to stable release. Anything that's related to an unstable API can have changes in the stable V4 because it's under the unstable tag, or unstable directory. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much. Everything is staying the same for now. We're just getting ready for release candidates.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, I was about to say that we recall correctly, there was a layer WebSocket, for example, in the node socket server that constructs a socket server out of the Node.NET package, for example. There are also other ones that are available. So that could definitely be replaced by that
I
as a
was
way to
fairly sure we
construct.
had one for the WS package as well.
Hmm.
Let me open my browser
I'm
as well. I
checking.
can
Yeah.
send links. Also, it looks like this repository is built on v3, which is fine. v3 is still going to be maintained for a period of time after v4 is stably released. But just know that it's probably better that those of you who have been waiting to upgrade to v4 for it to be out of beta, it's probably a good idea to start thinking about doing that migration.
Now it's a good time to do it, basically.
Let me see here. Platform.
Yeah.
So
We have one based on VS for the client, I am sure. I don't recall for this server, to be honest.
well, regardless, it is worth evaluating the socket servers that we've already got pre-baked. Yeah, so there's the WS package is imported here. So where is it used? WS. So make WebSocket, the constructor, uses no, in the node socket server in platform node shared.
Oh, sorry.
Packages platform
node shared. So see
node socket.
Node socket server.
Yeah, search for make WebSocket. So this constructor
there is, yeah.
does use Node WS WebSocket server. I think there's also one that uses WS. Wait, which branch are you on? Mattia, can you...
Oh, wait. Why am I on this weird branch? Sorry.
Yeah, go to V3. Because this individual is still working off V3.
Yeah. There we are.
So if you search for make WebSocket in V3, you'll see that this does use the WebSocket server from the WS package.
Yeah.
So again, like you could save yourself the having to maintain all of this and just use the pre-baked layer that uses make WebSocket, which I think, so layer WebSocket from this package is the layer that uses this constructor. So you could just use this layer and not have to build the WebSocket server yourself. And then to integrate with your effect server, maybe we can look at how this individual's integrating with their server as well.
I think they are just handling the upgrade. From what it seems, let me double check. Oh wait, it's still RPC server, and then it goes into a managed runtime.
Yeah, so instead of using a managed runtime, you could see if there's a way you can use a web handler. So the RPC APIs, I think from the RPC server module, there's a to web handler method that allows you to construct a an
HTTP web handler out of the WebSocket.
Yeah, and also the RPC modules themselves have. Hang on 1 second.
They also had like a method that exposed directly just the handler function, if I recall correctly.
They do, but I was thinking that there is a. I thought there was a.
there is the web handler on the HTTP router, which you can get out of the server, if I recall correctly. But you'd still need before to convert the RPC server into an HTTP router. At least inject that into an HTTP router, right?
Yeah, there's also hang on. So what I would suggest is there's a couple of layers that are exported from the RPC server module. The first one you might be interested in, since you're using WebSockets as your transport, is the layer protocol WebSocket router, which is what the layer. If you go to the sorry, Mattia, if you go to V3's RPC server module,
There it is.
this is the accountability repo.
Why did it jump? Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Just go to the V3 branch and then go to
okay, there it is.
The RPC server module.
I can just move before in here because otherwise V3, okay. And then in the RPC module, there we go.
Yeah, source
RPC server, there it is.
So in the RPC server module, there is a layer HTTP router method here that will default to using WebSockets for communication. I think.
No, it does HTTP, I think. Oh, no, you're right. You're right. WebSocket, you're right.
Anyway, if you specifically say use WebSockets in the protocol, it'll use that as its protocol. And then you can specify your RPC serialization and everything like that afterward. And then you can always convert this layer into a web handler there's a method in here called toWebHandler, which you could use, but I don't exactly know how that plays with the other layers in here. Anyway, there's options in here that prevent you from having to use prevent you from having to build the WebSocket server yourself, and let you just focus on coding the RPC logic. Using a managed runtime is fine also, to be clear. Like, it's fine. It's just that there are other options, like if you wanted to explore them. Anyway, there were a couple of other questions that came in related to V4. Evangeline asks, will RC releases be released at the same rate that the beta releases had been? Probably not. It'll probably be a lot more time between releases, because I mean, listen, we're not saying that there has to be a fixed amount of time between RC releases. Like, if we have a change that needs to get out, we'll probably just do an RC release. But it's not going to be like when the beta first came out and we did like 30 releases over the course of a week or something like that to address bugs and things like that. I think that it'll be a slower cadence naturally, but we're not committing to any particular like window of time that needs to be between every RC. The RC tag is to indicate that these releases are potentially candidates for stable V4. But yeah. So not committing to any particular release cadence. There was a question from FIWS that was not related to cluster, which is absolutely wild to me.
Actually, yeah.
Stream.async push seems to no longer be a thing in V4. Is migrating to stream.callback, which needs a queue, the correct path? I think it is. Let me double check.
It is.
I forget the semantics here, but let's check.
For any callback based, yeah. Oh, there you go. Stream async push, stream.callback. Right? We were speaking about async push, right? Which was the method that was asked. Yeah, there is a migration v3 to v4 that says stream async push is now stream.callback.
I remember Tim also talking about this with me and saying that the new implementation would supports both. So
yeah,
let us know if you run into issues. But
basically killed 4 different APIs.
Yeah. I think there was another question. I'm monkey patching the HTML media element .prototype.playback rate accessor and the event target.add event listener rate change in order to override certain website behavior. When playback rate is accessed on an element I haven't seen before, I want to add it to a weak map of HTML element and SubscriptionRef, and I want to update the ref with what the website's.
Oh, I see.
I get it. This is related to the question we were asked before.
Yeah. Basically, it's you kind of like effectifying the events that are emitted by any HTML media element that's on the page, right? Because it's monkey patching. And then getting back, what I'm failing to see is where then that element of the weak map is used, because that describes what you store somewhere eventually. But what did you use that subscription ref for, right? That's still an open question on the plate, right?
Yeah, it seems like it's a little bit of a hack because you're sort of escaping a lot of like effect just to be able to use subscription refs for this particular case. If this is the particular API you want to use, then run sync is probably fine. But let me just check the subscription ref constructor in v4 and make sure that you're not going to run into an issue. It creates a pub sub. Yeah, I think it's fine to do it this way. I think there are probably better APIs to be had here. Like this is fine. It just feels like a little bit of a hack.
Yeah.
Any other question?
On this one, I would be curious on the actual end usage. I mean, unless, as you said, the API you want is that, but I'd be curious on why that, because probably the fruit is hanging elsewhere.
Yeah, again, without like code, it's really, really hard to comment on this stuff. Like to me, just reading this, it looks like a very large hack, but I'm sure there's reasons for this, which is why like without code, it's really hard to comment. I want to just quickly peek at this RPC server thing one more time.
I'm just checking if.
I get why this was done the way it was now. Because they're using the upgrade event from Express to handle the request. And then emit like connections that way. So I mean, this is fine.
Oh,
there are probably ways to wire this together that like make more sense, or maybe are less like overhead from the like. What am I trying to say? There are probably ways to do this that involve less plumbing. But if this allows you to get started with using RPCs, effect RPCs, then this is fine. It's just there's quite a bit of plumbing here, and I wonder if there's a different way you could go about wiring the RPC server into your Express app that didn't necessitate all of this. So upgrade is the thing. The upgrade event is a handler, right? So this thing, I'm just looking at this.
Yeah.
Handle upgrade.
This is.
I get it. Yeah, again, there may be better ways to do this, but without like getting in there and fooling around a little bit, I'm not sure what they are. But if this allows you to like run your RPC server, I think it's fine.
I'm mostly trying to understand where that is connected to.
The one thing is you may want to, in your main, where you start the RPC runtime, you may want to also bind to sigint and sigkill to make sure that you dispose of your managed runtime. So like a managed runtime acquires all the resources from the layers that you give it, but it'll never release those resources unless you manually call dispose on that managed runtime. That's why it's like a managed runtime, because you have to manage it. Well, it manages the layers for you, but like you have to manage disposal. So the one thing that you could do to make this a tiny bit more robust is in your main, do like a process.onSigint and make sure that you dispose of the managed runtime there.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, things you want us to talk about? Do you want us to talk about the V4 merger? Do you want us to talk about other things? Is there anybody that has more code for us to look at?
We want code.
I have a hard stop in 15 minutes, so we have 15 more minutes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that it took us so long to get the stream started today. Blame Riverside.
We always blame Riverside.
Well, it's just so ridiculous. Like I had the whole RTMP thing set up, and it just erased.
I decided that it was not today. Yeah.
V4 docs when V4 is stable.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I mean, but we're still working on the new website. It should be a much better experience than the old website, hopefully. It's giving us a lot more freedom with the docs, which is nice. But it's not trivial to have to rewrite all that documentation. So V4 docs will come once V4 is stable, but the new website will be out before then, I think.
We also have Robert saying that refactored the GitDB that we have seen last time, so it could be also interesting to see that as well.
Yeah, Robert, if you want to send us the links in Discord,
Yeah.
because I think YouTube will erase it. If you send us the links in Discord, we can look at the GitDB thing. And what's the tech stack for the new website? It's an Astro website, but we're not using Starlight anymore. It uses Astro, and it also uses React and Atom, Effect Atom for highly interactive portions of the website. So like there are islands in the Astro site that are React plus Effect. What about a V4 RC of the Effect Playground? Yes, it will exist. Probably not with the initial release of the new website, but it will exist. It is on the list.
There
I think
is a link
Robert
from
sent.
Robert.
Yeah.
Just
I don't
copying
remember
it right now.
which module did we focus on last time?
Let me share first, and then we can look into it. Sure.
I have a question. There's a question in YouTube. I have a question about the ecosystem. Right now, Effect doesn't seem to fully cater to the ecosystem. At least that's what the job posting suggests. Are you working on addressing this? What ecosystem? Effect caters very well to the Effect ecosystem. And it addresses quite a few issues with writing plain JavaScript and TypeScript. But it is a paradigm shift in like that. It forces you to program in a different way. But many folks think that that's a good thing. Some folks don't, and that's fine. Yeah, I think I would need, so Ben Bergreier, I think that we would need a little bit more context there. There was also a question about the new website. Will the new website change a lot content-wise? So the docs content initially is being migrated directly over from the old website. The visuals and whatnot will be better, hopefully, to folks. We've revamped the blog and the podcast sections of the site. The docs section of the site is also reworked. It should look relatively similar for now, but it's giving us a lot more freedom to change content in the future and have a lot more flexibility. So initially the docs content is being migrated directly over, but once V4 is stable, we're planning on like trying to write docs that are more semantic, more easy for users to digest and whatnot. So don't expect like major changes in docs content when the new site is released. The new site is giving us the
base to do that, basically.
Yeah, like the scaffolding we needed. That was a great answer. It was enough for me. Okay. I didn't really answer. I don't know if I answered the question, but basically, yeah, Effect has its own ecosystem. It interops very well with like plain JavaScript and TypeScript, but it does force you to think and program in a different way. But again, like many folks think that's a good thing, and it also gives you a lot of tools out of the box that a lot of other that basically just don't exist in plain JavaScript and TypeScript. Mattia, this is a question for you. The Effect LSP and Effect TSGO, do they already work natively with TypeScript 7?
Yes, they do. They do. It works both with TypeScript 7 stable, 7.0.2, I think is the latest one. And also the new, if you are still using the @TypeScript/native preview, I suggest you to migrate instead to use the TypeScript namespace for packages, because the TypeScript team is moving the nightly builds there as well, as they were previously with the previous iteration of TypeScript. So again, I suggest you to install TypeScript 7, either stable or nightly builds. And now the LSP supports both the latest stable version 7 and the latest stable nightly builds that are basically rebuilt almost automatically the night after they ship. So basically, from now on, the policy will be that I'll be basically supporting the nightly builds and always the 7.0 latest one. So we will always support the latest stable plus the nightly. TypeScript 7.1 is supposed to have some API thing. Is that interesting for Effect? It could be. The issue again, it will be interesting for some ecosystem tools, the API that will ship with 7.1. They won't change the story for the TypeScript LSP, because the issue is that wherever they are designing the API, the issue is that having all of the functionalities that the Effect LSP provides needs to be very tight about the type data. That's basically the shape of your types, the errors that you define, or whatever, at type level. And the story is that with TypeScript Go, that means that every kind of API you would have would basically mean that you have data that's going back and forth in between process, for example, either via an in-memory APC or whatever. And the story is that is very, very slow. It has been optimized, but it is still very, very slow for the amount of checks that, for example, the LSP does. So there will be APIs that could be interesting for external tools, like, for example, Visual Code extensions and whatever. But the LSP story, I think, won't change because, again, as said before, the issue is that we need a very fast way to interact with the type system. And now that the type system resides in Go, the only way to do that is to stay in Go, basically.
Getting back to Robert's
Yep.
project, I don't remember exactly where we were looking. I think
we had a look at document last time, if I recall correctly, that we had that discussion about the shape that document could have had. And also, I think that the other thing that we watched was the event store, if I recall correctly. Let me double check.
Robert, I guess since you're in chat, are there any major refactorings you did that you want us to take a peek at? Because right now we're sort of just flying blind going through modules. But are there any like significant changes you want us to peek at? Maybe while we're waiting for Robert to answer, we can just see if there's any additional questions.
I just wanted to reply to Fifth. Maybe they will have some native plugin API. Well, the issue is that if they will have, the issue is that the routes are either they ship Go APIs, but the issue is that Go does not have cross-platform story for loading dynamically plugins like DLLs or things like that. And also the issue is that now then you are linking some binary that is basically untrusted into TypeScript. And that's something that also, given how things are moving in the world, you need to be aware of. And then again, also writing something like WebAssembly or whatever means that then you would have to have inside Go an interpreter of WebAssembly or a binding that binds to any other like JavaScript or whatever. And then you are back to the issue we were mentioning before about basically moving data in between two different processes or two different runtimes, basically. So that's why I think, at least for a while, we will stay with the patch binary story. Let me check. Document and Git store, and also go through the README as a high-level example that I added as a guide. Okay.
While you pull that up, Mattia, I'll just answer Ion in
Yep.
the Discord. So Ion did provide some code examples. Ion, in this particular example, one thing I'm worried about related to updating these subscription refs with the playback rate thing. I don't know how often playback rate fires, like how often that particular method is called or whatever, but running going through the full effect runtime, like effect.run sync, effect.gen, and going through that whole effect runtime could be, if it's a very like hot path, like if playback rate is being called constantly, like hundreds of times per second or whatever, this could get like prohibitively, like it could be a bottleneck. That's why like usually this type of stuff is like lifted into the like part as becoming part of like a layer of the effect runtime to avoid like performance issues. So you don't have to go through like constructing a full runtime, running the full effect, getting the result out, etc. I don't know enough about the like media element like API to know if this is an efficient way to do things. But just like looking at it, it does look a little bit hacky. Like I wonder if there's a way where you could have like I wonder if there's a way where you could have a layer that has a weak map of subscription refs, like and then maybe like you do the initial registration of I don't know enough, but like there's probably a way to do this where you don't have to monkey patch the playback rate and you can instead
Subscribe to
like
it.
yeah, get or subscribe somehow when playback rate is invoked. That doesn't involve monkey patching and running the full, like going through the full effect runtime every time that method is called.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, folks, I do have to drop. Mattia, feel free to keep going. I'm sorry that we had some technical difficulties getting started. But yeah, feel free to keep asking questions in the office hours thread, and Mattia and I will even respond after Mattia is done later, if we can. But yeah, thank you, folks, and I will see you folks next week. Cheers, everyone. I'll leave it to Mattia.
Yep. Thank you, Max. Okay, so let me just rearrange for a second my windows, just because I need now to move that up so I can see that better, and I can move this one down so I don't need to. Okay. We were going in something that Robert mentioned that changed. He mentioned the, let me double check. Document Git, so also through the README as a level example as I added to you. So let's start maybe by checking the example. I grasped the overall idea you have in here. Basically, it's an append-only store that's baked by Git. And so the idea is that Git store is the main application layer. It opens and cache scope, store instances by repository, name and data space. Node application should provide effect platform services and the edge. So yeah, you create the Git stores. And then you start, you say, yeah, that's a store. Store a transaction that creates a transaction and gets back the transaction and run that in here. That's nice. That's the TX. That's now, I think that this now automatically, for example, rollbacks when this effect fails or things like that. So I think that this is indeed a nice addition to have. Maybe I can also show later on what we meant maybe last time with the transaction concept being provided as a service, and then you run it, and that seems fine. You get back the result. These are the options. The API is now are basically the one I would expect. Transaction, we provide the options and you get back things like that. Transaction result, I am curious about that. I imagine maybe the transaction has information about the commit ID, for example, that has been performed in order to push that data, right? And then you have other options, other method that seems fine. So basically, from what I read in here, transaction is the only way to append into the Git store event log. Is that true, what I'm reading from that? If so, that means that basically you could have only one transaction open at a time, or you can have multiple ones, right? And then transaction, oh, there is a high level write API for documents. Yeah, so there are write only. Yeah. And you provide Git information from the transaction, the pointer, imagine to which branch maybe you want to push the transaction, and then you basically write documents in there, and you can even write them as they are being written. Okay, that makes sense. Writes or replace document, deletes a document, read the virtual tree. An empty transaction can return a base snapshot, but it cannot create an initial snapshot. I think that this feels nicer. From what we have seen last time, I'd say that that's definitely a very good improvement in the year. Yeah. Again, I am not sure if you are also wanting to, if I recall correctly, those basically were append-only transactions, if I recall correctly. So yeah. Ooh, there are quite a few amount of errors, so probably you may want to group the errors in categories and then use the new reason pattern in order to group the errors in maybe categories instead of having all of them like that. For example, I see that there are maybe Git provider connected errors or object related errors. I would probably do that. And then you have low-level services for code that needs Git storage primitives directly. And this is basically, yeah. Yeah, I would say that overall this feels way, way nicer. The only thing that I was mentioning before is the transaction story. Let me maybe just give me a second so I can open maybe a folder where I can show off something. Okay. So let me first prepare. I'll increase the font size before sharing my screen. So you won't scream at me saying, hey, the font size is too little. Okay, that should be more than enough. And now I'm gonna share my screen on this one instead. Okay, and I'm gonna share this one. Okay. So one thing that I've seen is that you had things like you have basically methods like export const read. That was something that was basically an effect that takes and that returns maybe something that we will call a document. Let me stub it out just to have something going on. And returns maybe a document array, never, and requires a git store. Okay, and the git store may have many methods. So basically what you have right now is things like, let's declare this maybe. Let's just do that one. And you have maybe that takes in a document ID to read. Let's say that's string for now. And then you have other methods, like, for example, you have list that takes anything and returns an array of document. And finally, let's say that you have an API that's write, and that takes in the document itself, which could be, let's say, any data that can be JSON serialized. And then you return back maybe a document ID. Document ID. Document ID. Let's say that's just a string for now. Okay, so right now you have basically this kind of APIs, and you have the write that right now it's basically locked behind a concept of transaction. To create, you need to provide some options, like, for example, message for the transaction, and then you get back something that is transaction, and that has the methods to write document, and then you basically have an f that takes in a tx, which is a transaction, and can return any effect. Oops. Effect e r, and that goes back as an effect of er. Okay, so basically you have a shape like this. Okay, and now your API plays as you open a transaction, you say the message is hello, and then you basically run with the transaction, and you can say tx.write tx.write, and you say my data 42. Okay, so right now your API for a transaction is basically like this. So in your program, you can do things like, hey, I want to do stuff in a transaction. And this works, but the issue is that it does not, in my opinion, properly like compose nicely, because let's say that you have multiple writes that you want to do in here. What you would like to do is something like yield write doc1, and then you do doc2, and then you maybe say at the end transaction, and the message is hello. So what you maybe are looking for is an API that plays more like this. But the issue is that you want write to be available only when you are actually in a write context. So what you can do is you can leverage the effect services. For example, we can transform this transaction into context service, and now that context service will have the write method in here, And now what you can do is that transaction, instead of returning a function that takes in a callback, it will return basically a function that takes in an effect that can have any requirement, and the result will be something that will basically exclude from that requirement your transaction. So that way you can have your write API not be on the transaction, but to be something that's global and that requires maybe both the Git store and the transaction. So that way now you can have this API with, as you can see, you can decide to provide the transaction. And if you don't provide the transaction, you still get the service there. And that's basically what prevents you for avoiding to have a program that does not compile because you are using write in a context where you do not have a transaction. That's something that you could play on. And this unlocks also another interesting feature is that context also has context of a reference. There it is, reference. And the reference, let me check it out. There you go. Reference, there you go. You can have also a context reference, and the concept of a context reference is that a reference is basically something that you can put in your context without having it to bleed into your effect context, so without showing into your effect context. So this is kind of explicit. It requires you to provide the transaction. If you forgot, you basically get something that you get something that requires explicitly the transaction. But let's say that maybe you find something where you want your API that if no transaction is provided, maybe one is automatically created behind the scene, or something maybe is put in a dirty way that you do not provide any consistency assurance, but you still want to be able to write. What you can do then is basically remove the transaction, and instead the transaction can become something like open transaction becomes a context reference. And the context reference is basically something that can provide a shape of data, so, and needs obviously a key. Let me maybe provide something. What are you complaining on? Oh yeah, you need 2 arguments and I'm only providing 1. Let me say that we need, let me copy, okay, that's faster. You can see that you can provide a context reference, you provide an ID, and then you can provide also the default implementation for that. And so you can say something like, hey, we may have a context reference where the default transaction is basically nothing. Or that way we can remove this and say this is the TX. And in here, we will say that the default value when no transaction is provided is null, or it could maybe become our transaction shape, which could be whatever you have, or null. Let's say that you need a transaction ID in order to commit a transaction. And the nice thing about this, as you can say, is something that could provide a transaction or not and does not require anything. And that way you can implement your transaction function. Maybe we can sketch it out instead of just having that. You can say that we have function transaction that takes our options, message as a string, and then we return something that takes our AER effect AER. And then what we do here is basically returning our effect, but in the transaction we provide our open transaction, and we say that the value is transaction provide service open transaction, and then we have our transaction ID, let's say just math.random for now. Okay. What? Oh yeah, I'm inside a repository with the LSP. So let's say that this is your transaction ID, and that way you provide the open transaction. As you can see, there is no reference to our transaction service in here. But what this unlocks is that when you want to then implement your write, you can do something like function write. Takes in again your document you want to write. Let's say any for now, and then what you do is basically return an effect that gets the transaction that's currently open, and you just yield the open transaction, and then you can say some whatever you want with that transaction ID, and yeah, maybe yield star effect log transaction ID. So that way you can basically define a write function that can work both with and without the transaction. And when you have the transaction, it will use the transaction that has been provided and being constructed in here, basically. And when you are not using that, you are basically falling back to not having that, and you can have your logic do whatever you want. That depends, again, if you have maybe something like, for example, that you require both a transaction, but also you still want your store. You then do something like, yeah, I'll require my Git store service. That way the write requires only the Git store, and then maybe your store API will provide some API like write that can or cannot receive the current transaction ID. Not sure if I fully explained what I'm describing in here, but basically this is a pattern you can use. You can either have explicit services for a transaction, or you can leverage the context reference in order to pass them behind the scene. So that way they are not like strictly required. You can also use effect service option, which basically allows you to access any service that's there. You can say that you can see that you can also use effect service option, and these will not pollute your requirements with the transaction, and just give you an option that can or cannot have the shape that's actually provided by your transaction. Not sure if that makes sense to you. I hope so. As always, I'm not good as Maxwell explaining stuff, but yeah. But the idea is basically that you can either have an API that provides the transaction explicitly and requires that for the write, and that stays at a type level and prevents you for being able to perform writes without a transaction, but also that composes very nicely, because then you are not obligated to have the write be performed inside of that callback that flows into the effect context. Or you can use, if you don't want an explicit service, because maybe your store implementation supports both transaction and non-transaction mode, then you can still have write APIs that require that as an optional. I also think that we had another question meanwhile. About TSGO, there have been a ton of discussions. Transaction is a reflection. Git's stage files plus commit. The idea is you start with a pointer, you add files, a commit. Yeah, so the previously described shape where you have transaction as a service, probably I think that now it's basically the best you could have. Because I could also imagine that given you are dealing with Git, I could also imagine that maybe a transaction could open something like, for example, a work tree in a new branch, maybe, and then it pushes a PR or something like that, something more weird. But yeah, having that explicit as that. About TSGO, there have been a ton of discussion about batching, and doesn't effect just really fits patterns similar to how request resolver or it's called module works. Also, sorry, I don't somebody eventually I don't understand what's the connection with about TSGO and batching. See the git work trees package for work tree lifecycle. Okay, I think that maybe we can have a quick look at that. Let me check. Git work tree. Work tree lifecycle. Yeah, maybe this is, I'm sorry, maybe this is too much context to go on, maybe. But basically it seems like you use a SQLite in order to keep track of the work trees that have been created for a repo, right? And then you have APIs to set up and create work trees. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let me finish to check the question that it was before. There have been discussion about batching, and doesn't effect just really fits the pattern similar to how request resolver or, do I remember correctly, module works? Does it? Also, what's reasoning for the data module to stay with these few small utilities and not merge with some other modules if almost all of it has become embedded in equal hash itself? And generally, the refactor sounds counterintuitive to the core values of effect-smol. It's not clear how centralizing everything instead of having distributed hash and equal makes the bundle smaller. I was quite surprised to discover that no longer add hash and equal symbols and a prototype. There has been some changes about how we handle equality, if I recall correctly. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm failing to understand how that connects to TSGO. Yeah. I also think that Matthias and oh yeah, you're pointing to the discussion for the APIs for TypeScript. Yeah, there are few discussion about that. Maybe it's not like something worth spending on office hours, but the thing is that basically there are a lot of different usages that have been in the past around the APIs that uh, are provided by TypeScript, and now I kind of also understand what the TypeScript team is trying to do, is trying to find the common ground that will eventually join everyone into everything. But again, the issue I see, at least performance wise, is that any API they could provide will be IPC based, and again, being IPC based means that there is a cost in transferring data. And the issue is that the at least what the features are already provided by the effect LSP again are very tied to the data structures. For example, effect TypeScript Go give usually like a 10x improvement, and already right now with a lot of a lot of optimization and in memory improvements, the effect LSP is almost a 1.5x degrade in performance over the standard TypeScript Go performance. So that means that if you had a project using classic TypeScript that took 100 milliseconds to process type checking, with TypeScript Go, usually you go around 10 or 12 milliseconds. And if you enable all of the diagnostics that the effect language service provide, you go almost to 20. And if we have to do that using APIs that live in another process, um, we would have been in the range of 100 milliseconds. So you basically come back to the initial performance that TypeScript had. And also like the classic language service that was done in JavaScript with the classic APIs had a lot of like shortcuts and trickery that was done in order to um, basically aggressively cache whatever. So yeah, I think that for now, I am happy to see the APIs for external systems, and um, yeah. TSGO batching, if implemented, would allow making a lot of requests in one round trip across process memory boundary to TSGO. Oh, you mean batching of API requests? I see. Instead of making many small serialization and call, because the serialization and transfer can be significantly minified in time. And the two questions are separate. Okay, sorry, I thought that it was connected. So about the batching, yeah, but the thing is that I think that there are a lot of rules. For example, for example, the leaking requirements rule that we have in the effect LSP, and other rules that basically depends on calling at least 4 or 5 type APIs one after the other. Uh, because let's just imagine, like for example, the very basic task of the deciding if one variable is an effect that requires asking the type for the variable, getting the properties of that type, checking if that type has a property named effect, and if it has, we need to get the types for the properties of success, failures, and requirements. And then we need to once we get back the pointers for those to basically get the types for those. So we are doing basically 9 API calls, and batching them probably would reduce that to 4 or 3 calls, but they are still sequential because you need the pointer of a symbol that one returned to the other in order um, to do the job. So yeah, batching could improve, but it could not solve entirely. Whereas right now, that is entirely done on the type on the Go side, and it is already cached by using the same cache that TypeScript Go uses for its type checking. So we get basically half of the cache already for free by staying on the Go side, and the other half of the cache is implemented on the Go side. So it can use and reuse the same pointer that Go uses without crossing boundaries. And the question about data, basically there is still the data module, because there are also like other utilities in there. There is, for example, detect error and other APIs that are still very useful, that are strictly not related to the equality. And also, I think we already spoke about that in a previous effect office hours, but there has been some changes in v4 how equality is done, if I recall correctly. Let me also check if we have other questions. Sorry if that has been asked, but will the effect LSP work with TS7 or they have dropped plugins correctly? It still works with TypeScript 7. Maybe I can given like 3 people already have asked that. Maybe let's do a new project and let's show it out how it works. Yes. So there, crash. Okay. So let me share. Okay. Let me first increase my window size, because otherwise, if the font is not readable, you'll start telling me, and you're right. So I'll do that up front. Okay. Let me share now the correct window. Instead of this one, we need to share this one. Okay. So create a new TypeScript project in this folder that uses TypeScript 7. Okay. Let's start with that. And while that's starting, we will basically get, okay, just 702. Okay, yep. Okay, so now we have a TypeScript project. We can npm add effect just to have effect to show off. Okay, and we can npm e. Okay. Okay, so now we have a TypeScript 7 project. Whoops. What we'll do next is pnpx add effect TSGO setup. You can choose where is your tsconfig if you want effect language servicing that dependencies. You can choose which preset of rules you want. I want to go straight to effect native. I am using VS Code, and it will basically prompt all of the things that needs to be set up. As you can see, it set up the effect TSGO patch command. It will add the effect TSGO dependency. It will set up, even though TypeScript 7 have dropped plugins, we still use the plugins section as a way to configure the effect LSP. So that way, if you have mixed projects that are running the classic TypeScript for editor experience, sorry, but you want to use TypeScript for building, that's fine. And then it set up also the VS Code settings. And now you can say, yes, I want to apply my changes. I need to install them. And now that I install, you'll see that it will back up the binary and now use the effect language service one. Now if I run tsc ---- version, we should see that we are on version 7.0.2 with effect TSGO version 0.22. And now if we go in here, we reload our window to make that take changes. In theory, if we do something like import effect from effect and we do effect of log hello, and we need to also show menu here and select version, and we need to say we want to use the custom version. And in theory, if I didn't do anything wrong, but as always, the demo time is the one that fails me. That is including the TSC, yes. But yeah, that is basically the setup you need in order to start using that. I need to check why it's not. Oh, probably the editor is not resolving the correct one. But yeah, but basically that's how you get that working. Once you do that, you're golden. I need just to double check that again. But now if I attempt to, for example, tsconfig.json, that should work. Yeah, that works. So I hope that replies the experience with TypeScript 7. Why do you think this will survive if TS Plus was too much work to maintain? Because this is a completely different approach. TS Plus was a proper fork, meaning that it was. TS Plus also had other reasons while it didn't continued. There is an entire blog post from Mike on why. But the reason is that this is not a proper fork. This is working the same way that oxlint works. It is basically cloning in a subdirectory the TypeScript Go repository, and it's just recompiling the binary, injecting a few hooks where the custom diagnostics get injected, and that's really it. Nothing more. So it is way less invasive than what, for example, TS Plus was doing, which was like a proper fork. This is more. This is basically using the same pattern that Oxlint does. So if it fails for Oxlint, it fails for us as well. Let me see if we have other question. You could try out stacked effect. Yeah, I could have tried stacked effect. You're right. You're right. Hello, I have a GIST for DB transaction with Drizzle with effect support and effect 4. Should I put it in Discord, or I can in this YouTube chat? Everything in Discord, please, because unfortunately the YouTube chat always like to remove links. I don't know why, but it likes to do that. It likes to do that. Let me see if we already have the link. Not yet. I'm on it. Nice. I'll wait a couple of seconds. Meanwhile, I'll check. How can I find stack effect? Searching in Google leads to very weird result. Let me maybe stack effect Lloyd. And this is share again. This is stack effect. There it is. And this is a clip for scaffolding TypeScript app. Let's try it, to be honest. Yeah, let's try it. Let's see. I haven't tried it, never, so let's see it in action. So terminal, let me share this one. Okay, so let's say that we want to initialize my app. Yes, I want to run it. I want to use Node with pnpm. Monorepo, yeah, turbo repo sounds fine. Excellent. I prefer dprint with vitest. No Git repository, please. That sounds fine to me. And I really love this UI. I really love this UI. Very nice work. Yes. Continue with the changes. Yes. It will create this file, which makes sense. Yes. And now inside of my app, I should have. Nice. Oh Lord, you need to start upgrading for the new TSGO language service as well. But yeah, the experience looks slick. Congrats. Very like it. So let me check if we had the link now. Okay. Okay, so this is an experience. Let me, share again that one. Okay. Effect Drizzle transaction. So let me read what's the comment. I have this experiment to handle DB transaction with effect 4 and Drizzle 1.x. It's inspired by Lucas Barak video, but as Drizzle will handle effect natively, it may be simpler now. I would like to know if it's a good way of handling this. The execute method in the database service is the main thing here. It tries to yield a transaction if it exists. You use it, else we use a normal Drizzle transaction. Yes, this is. I think that if it's implemented, this is very similar to what I was describing before. Let me see. So basically, you have first you create a possible connection with a database effect. Okay, then we have a database which is basically a service that provides your DB Drizzle, which is this, I imagine, DB effect is, oh, there is DB effect. Yeah, it's just basically Drizzle shape. And then we have client or client transaction, which is basically PG effect transaction. Okay, or the Drizzle. Okay, and then transaction is our service that requires a transaction and provide the PG effect transaction. Okay. And then we have the execute fn that is a function that takes the DB or the transaction and returns an effect. And then database with transaction is something that runs your effect and removes the transaction. And execute basically takes in the client or TX and then runs. And the actual implementation is using a service option, yes, of the transaction, exactly what we were seeing before. And if we have the transaction, it calls the callback with the transaction. And if we don't, we calls the transaction with the normal DB. And then with transaction is just providing the transaction. Yes, I think that this is very complementary to what I was trying and failing to explain before. But yeah, this is very this is almost what I was discussing before. The major point that I was discussing before is basically that instead of having your execute in here taken in a function that gets the client or the client transaction, what you can also do is basically say, hey, I don't care if you are in or outside of a transaction, and you can just require in here a connection, and that's fine. And then what you can do, you can use the service option, and then you will always erase the connection. And what will happen is that if this transaction service is there, then you can use the transaction, sorry, as a connection. Otherwise, if there isn't transaction, you can fall back to the normal connection. And then the usage, the usage in here kind of have the same issue where you still have to pipe in the CL. But I think that there are basically two different options. If you want to, for example, to provide um, the specific shape for the transaction in here, probably I would avoid in here providing also the union which one member could be the transaction, uh, because given that you had to provide the transaction service before, one could just yield the transaction service to get back the actual transaction that's currently in there. If one wants to have a method that requires mandatorily a transaction, otherwise, if you want to have an execute that works with or without a transaction, what you can do is you just have an execute that does not require um, any services in here, just requires an effect and then provides back an effect. And the DB again is provided at construction of the layer. Yeah, but I think that this is a good way. Again, probably the only thing that I would change, but depend, is that that callback, probably we could avoid this and just convert that into some service that you can provide that's always like erased, like a connection service. Because in here you have like a DB, and basically you can say, hey, I require a connection in there, so there is no need to have that provided in here. You can just like yield the DB and get back the connection. And otherwise, if you want a method that has to run into a transaction, instead you will yield the transaction, and you will have an effect that has an explicit requirement over the transaction, and the only way to run that effect is to wrap it with transaction. But overall, I think that this is indeed like a very, very good approach. Indeed. Okay, let me double check the YouTube. Uh, why is Drizzle preferred over a simple native exception? I don't like a lot of exception just to perform a simple queries. Why do effect users reach for Drizzle? I mean, again, as we have said before, other times, um, there are trade-offs. Drizzle is an ORM, and ORMs give you some features for free and trade-offs for other. For example, a simplicity of running a query or reaching out for very specific database functionalities, which you cannot usually do behind an ORM, because usually ORMs hide away very specific functionalities of the DB provider under and behind the scene of a unified and simplified API. So it depends on what you want to achieve. If you want to just run queries, probably you use Effect SQL and that's it. If you want like more things like more database diffing, objects oriented APIs or whatever, you reach out for an ORM. So I don't see nothing bad. I would say that it depends on the use case. For example, I come from a background where ORMs were a no-go because we had to optimize very much for hundreds of gigs of data, and that meant that we needed to use native features of the DB provider, and usually ORMs hide them from you. Usually, my issue was to find a way to use an existing function but use a transaction. In the example at the end of the file, I am using 2 repositories, but I am providing a single transaction. And my issue was to find a way to use an existing function but use a transaction. I'm sorry, I do not understand what you mean with my issue was to find a way to use an existing function but use a transaction. And without the callback pattern, I could not find out how to deal with it. Inside of space repository dot face space repositories fetch spaces. Okay, let's maybe try to. This is effect v4, right? Yes, I think so. Let's maybe copy this one into my repo and look at it. Okay. I need to add what we need to add. Drizzle ORM. Okay. Which version again was of Drizzle? Because I think that the code unfortunately is not passing into I'm attempting to get the code to pass type checking. SQL. Oops. I'm gonna share my screen immediately. Let me just give this one 111. Okay. Let me share. These are weapons and dependency. No, unfortunately, it does not resolve. But you were saying that my issue was to find a way to use an existing function but use a transaction. Example, at the end, I am using 2 repositories, but I am providing 1 transaction. 2 repositories, but I am providing 1 transaction. Okay. Yeah. With 1 transaction. Okay. And without a callback pattern, I could find a way to deal with it inside of this fetch space. This square meant for the fetch spaces, it is defined without knowing if it is a transaction or no. It is a callback in the executable. Oh, yeah. The callback. Yeah, if you want to do not know if you have a transaction or not, then you go back to the pattern that I was describing before of basically picking one or the other, but also always like falling back to the database transaction, so the database connection, sorry, if there wasn't there, by using again the same like effect option pattern that you have used before. What you can do is you can use the service option, and if that resolves to known, you can fall back to the DB itself. And if you instead want that to be explicit, that you want explicitness, then you just yield the transaction as is. So having a single transaction that is on scope across multiple services at once. It is fine. If it depends on where you resolve them. If you resolve them in here, it will be on scope on all of the different methods. It does not. Um, it is up to where you call the resolution. Again, you do not strictly need to have the callback in here because the transaction that will be provided, um, that is also always resolved at the execution of this effect, because you are resolving the transaction inside of this effect. So it will be resolved where this effect is evaluated. So that means that if you provide a transaction in here, it will be solved when you invoke this, and when you invoke this, so it will be solved here. It will not be solved at database at layer construction. So either you go transaction explicit and then you require to have a specific transaction service to be provided, or you can always do similarly to whatever you're doing in here, that you go service option, get or else, and you fall back with the DB. So basically you can make it so that this execute requires always a connection, and that connection can come either from the transaction or the DB, depending on what's there. Okay, so if we don't have any questions, I think that we are fine. But also, I think that if you use like if you use the native client of Drizzle, this should already handle that. Let me check one thing. Oh yeah, you're already using the effect Drizzle one. Yeah, sorry, I thought that you were writing your own. Yeah. So if you're using the one from Drizzle, they should already handle that for you. That's why they provide you the PG effect transaction. So there is no need to do that. It's already handled by them. Unless, again, you want to write your own wrapper. And then if you want to write your own wrapper, then this pattern that we are describing makes sense. But if you are using directly the Drizzle ORM bindings that Drizzle provides for effect, they already have built-in support for handling the transaction correctly, if I recall correctly. Okay, so let me check if we have other one. Okay, so I think that given we do not have any other questions, I think that we can call it for today. So as always, it was a pleasure having you following up. And as always, let's meet us together next Wednesday for Wednesday Effect Day, as always. And as always, it has been a pleasure having you, and hope that today was some occasion to learn something more for every one of you. So thank you for your time. And again, see you next time. Bye bye.